We live in a fantasy world now. Reality has been destroyed.
This is the time that you really need to pay attention.
The probabilities are overwhelmingly on gold's side. That is the best environment to see gold increase its value.
Welcome to Palisades Gold Radio. I'm your host, Tom Bodrovics. Joining me today is John Adams, Chief Economist for As Good as Gold Australia. How are you today, John?
I'm doing well, Tom. How are you today?
I'm good. It's good to have you back. It's been about 12 months since we last spoke, and you've kind of been quiet or in the dark for almost a year here. And a couple of weeks ago, I guess you had announced the silver sex scandal, as you put it, on Wall Street Silver. And you're here today to fill us in about what happened in that situation and let's say color in a little bit more on that situation.
Absolutely. So, yes. So, about 12 months ago, just so we can refresh your audience, we in March of 2021, we had, I think on the 20th of March, I issued a tweet about the Perth Mint, their inability to deliver silver, particularly for unallocated, pull allocated accounts. That started a chain reaction where all sorts of investors were calling in terms of their bullion dealerships and their products, etc. And during that course, we had all sorts of things being said in all sorts of forums, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And there was a number of companies mentioned. And you and I did, I think we ended up doing two key interviews. So there was one with David Morgan, which I think I had about 110,000 views. And then about a week later, I did one with Craig Hemke. And we tried to explain to silver investors what is unallocated, what is pull allocated, what is the risk of fractional reserve schemes, what does it mean to investors, particularly if everyone calls in their redemption, which particularly in March of 2021, there was a lot of redemptions happening at the Perth Mint. Now, maybe we can talk about the Perth Mint at a subsequent point in time, but the interesting thing at that juncture was that the CEO of the Perth Mint at that point, Richard Hayes, went public after I said that the Perth Mint had been in default, and they were in default according to their contract, in terms of their contract, because they had a certain time frame to deliver silver under their unallocated and pull allocated products, and they couldn't deliver within the time frame. So that was a technical default. And then Richard Hayes basically went on the Australian Broadcasting Corporation on radio in Perth, said everything was fine, plenty of silver, 60 tons ready for sale, and that they just had some manufacturing problems. Well, here we are, 12 months on. Richard Hayes is no longer at the Perth Mint. He was basically dismissed in October of 2021 in disgrace. So the main financial newspaper in Australia is called the Australian Financial Review, which is the equivalent of the Wall Street Journal. They reported that he had huge operational and management deficiencies. He blew $100 million apparently on an IT project, and basically the board of the Perth Mint lost confidence in his management. Now, in regards to this claim, again, about that he had 60 tons ready for sale, only a couple of weeks after he made that claim, I went public and said that a wholesaler had asked for a ton to buy from the Perth Mint, and that person was refused sale. 12 months on, I can say that I know of at least a second person who, again, after Richard Hayes made that claim that they had 60 tons ready for sale, went to the Perth Mint straight after and said, okay, I want to buy some of the 60 tons, and they were denied. So when you have someone with now a very dodgy corporate history, who goes into damage control and makes claims that we have plenty of silver, and when people ask for the silver to buy on a legitimate commercial basis and they are refused sale, there is something more to the story. Now,
and again, this was just one example of either timelines being run like crazy, people being refused delivery, and it wasn't just by the Perth Mint, right?
Correct. So when we started talking about this openly. We were getting all sorts of information. I was getting all sorts of information about a whole host of companies. There was a lady who went on Wall Street Silver called Julie G. Silver, and made some comments about a company called ABC Bullion. So that's on the public record. And there was some controversy around that. And then I was getting some information about Kitco, and there was a number of statements I made about Kitco, both on Twitter, but also in terms of other forums. And then what happened was that on the 29th of April, I received a legal notice from the Sydney-based Dentons. So Dentons is an international law firm. They do have an Australian practice. So their headquarters is in Sydney. And one of their partners sent me a very nasty cease and desist notice on behalf of Kitco. And in that letter, they basically made a range of assertions. And that one letter led to a whole series of events which we're going to talk about in today's interview, because I really think it really underscores what happens when you really try to push some of these bullion dealerships in terms of the integrity of some of their products.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And again, unfortunately, this is just you recounting that tale, and these are your views of, your side of the story. I'm happy to, as always, to kind of entertain the other side of the story. But as you and I have spoken about offline, when pushed on this, you almost didn't get a response back, right?
Correct. So I mean, now we have to sort of do this interview in a slightly legalistic way, because the powers that be in Montreal may watch this and may wish to respond to it. But so the first thing I want to say is I've got about 11 slides we're going to show the audience today from a range of letters and emails that went back and forth between me, my legal team, Dentons, which is Kitco's lawyers, and Kitco itself. And when I say Kitco itself, we're going to the top of the company, which is the president, Bart Kittner. So now, like a few weeks ago, I sent you all the documents involved in this matter, Tom. And I said to you, Tom, read them, make sure that you're comfortable with them. So when we quote them, you know that I'm not making anything up, and that these are real quotes, like from real emails and in terms of real documents. So just for the benefits of the audience, can you confirm that you did get an email from me with all these documents, and you've read them and you're satisfied that what I'm about to show you is real?
Well, John, unless you're really good at Photoshop, from what I've seen and what you have told me, I guess I'm taking you at your word that these are real, but I have read all those documents. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the only other thing we have to be clear about is that, because and this will come clear shortly in the interview, is that our intention in this interview is to basically perform a public service. I mean, so you're an interviewer in the precious metal space. I'm an analyst. So our job is to inform the public. And that's the purpose of the interview. So the purpose of this interview is not to cause unnecessary damage, or to be malicious, or to be to demonstrate reckless indifference or anything like that. So yes, I just want to put that on the record, because
or make any false assertions either, right?
Absolutely, because that was some of the allegations that were made against me about 12 months ago. So the first thing I want to do, Tom, just so we can explain how this whole legal saga, how it unfolded, is I want to go back and quote a number of things from the original cease and desist notice that I received from Dentons on behalf of Kitco. So can we just go on to slide 1 if we can? So basically, this comes from paragraph 1. It says, our client has become aware of a number of statements published on Twitter regarding our client's business. And obviously the client is Kitco. The statements were published as separate tweets from your account. So that's obviously talking about me. And if we can go on to slide 2, Tom. So yes, so slide 2, all of the aforementioned have been clearly published maliciously or with reckless indifference as to their truth of the matters. The actions have caused and will continue to cause Kitco and personnel severe, unlawful, and irreparable damage, including but not limited to reputational damage and financial loss and damage. Now, before we move on, Tom, I just want to highlight the importance of this term irreparable damage. Now, when I think of the word irreparable, and when it comes to litigation, words do matter. So when someone says you've caused irreparable damage, I think of Humpty Dumpty. So Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall and you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And so the central allegation that Kitco made against me in this letter was that by me tweeting about Kitco and unallocated and full allocated and talking about what their customers were telling me about their products, I had caused damage so severe to Kitco that they can't recover from it. That is the central claim of their thesis and their legal claim against me. And that is such a that is such a profound statement that someone from regional Australia on the other side of the world, by sitting on his couch and issuing a few tweets, can have that sort of power. But that is effectively what Kitco had. That was one of their main assertions when they sent me this cease and desist notice 12 months ago. Now, can we just go on to slide 3 if we could? So they went on to say that, as such, Kitco considers that the statements and representations constitutes injurious falsehood for which there is an entitlement to relief and damages in tort, including an injunction to restrain you from continuing to make the statements and representations. Now, obviously, when they talk about an injunction, what does that mean? That basically means that they could go to a court and get a court order to say, stop tweeting about Kitco. I mean, injunctions are basically a court order to say stop doing whatever you're doing because you're causing damage or there's a contractual dispute or whatever the case may be. So that's what they meant about the injunction. Now, in regards to where I live, so I live in New South Wales, which is the largest state by population in Australia, and technically speaking. Now, the laws in the last, say, 5 years has changed. So individuals can sue for defamation in my state, but corporations cannot. Corporations can only sue for what they call injurious falsehood, and that's why the Dentons letter had that particular reference. So if we can just go on to the next slide, Tom. So injurious falsehood requires 3 basic conditions. The first condition is that someone has made a false statement against a business and the business products and the goods or services, etc. The second condition is that the intention of making a false statement, it was malicious. So you had an intent to cause harm, and it wasn't just a mistake. And then the third condition is that malicious false statement actually caused damage. And so when a company says I've suffered damage, they can't just say it. They actually have to quantify it. So it could be in the loss of sales, it could be in the loss of profits, and they have to be very specific. So, for example, if they say that on this particular day, our sales fell by 50%, and that was a result of a tweet made by this person, that's the type of case they would have to make. So, basically, what Kitco said,
I feel like that would kind of be hard to prove as well, would it not, John?
Yes, it would be hard to prove. Now, the one thing I forgot to mention as we're going through the previous slides was these 4 tweets were published by me on 3 particular days. And these were on the 6th, the 7th, and the 10th of April, 2021. So what they would have to show is that they suffered financial loss, so-called irreparable damage, after the 10th of April. And they would have to say that damage, whatever that damage is, resulted specifically from my tweets. Mm-hmm. To be honest, it's a very hard case for Kitco to prove, but that is what they basically said. Now, they basically said that they gave me a list of demands and they gave me 24 hours to comply with those demands. And if I didn't, they would start proceedings in court to basically stop me from tweeting about Kitco, and they would start to start litigation to recover in terms of the damage in which they said that they had experienced. Now, what were the conditions? They had 3 conditions. The first one is that I stopped talking about Kitco. In terms of the second condition was that all the tweets that they found offensive that I delete. And the third condition was that I had to issue a clarificational statement, or they wanted me to clarify my position on Kitco by publishing a tweet that they had put together. So one thing I can say, 12 months on, I have not complied with any of those conditions, and there's been no litigation against me. But that is what they had that is what they had put together. So if we can go onto slide 5, Tom. So basically, here's what they said about this 24-hour notice. They said, in the event you refuse or otherwise fail to comply with the above request within the timeframe stipulated, Kitco will take such action as it considers appropriate, which may include issuing proceedings without further notice. This includes, but is not limited to, Kitco taking all measures, including making an urgent application seeking injunctive relief to restrain the unlawful conduct. So they basically said 24 hours, otherwise we're either going to go get an injunction to stop you from talking about us, or that they were going to start proceedings and basically try to financially ruin me. And this is all because I issued a few tweets.
Mm-hmm. So John, what happened after you got this letter? Of course, we've already touched on, let's say, all of these different definitions, and how were you able to, let's say, react to that letter?
Sure. So when I get this letter on the 29th of April, I mean, so this was the first ever legal notice I ever received, and I was pretty nervous because I didn't actually understand, what the implications were. So I actually did respond the day after, on the 30th of April, and I basically said to Dentons, Kitco's lawyers, and I said, okay, specifically what is false, what is misleading, what is baseless, which was the, how they characterized some of my tweets. Because you've got to be very specific, which specific allegations, which specific words is false, baseless, and misleading, because that's what they would have to prove in court. And even before you get to court, the lawyers are duty bound to be very specific in their allegations if they're threatening to sue someone. But then we also said, okay, you said you suffered financial damage. Well, show us the damage. Give us 7 years of your financial accounts and allow us to, scrutinize your finances so we can actually be confident that you've actually suffered damage. So we sent the letter. We sent that letter on the 30th of April. Now I didn't want to mention Kitco straight away, but what I did was I put out a tweet. And so you've got the tweet on the screen. So it's breaking the silver cabal strikes back. I've been issued a cease and desist notice, talk about synthetic silver, but we're in the process of, in terms of responding. Now, part of what I said in my response was, so Kitco says to me, they put a gun to my head. They say, you got 24 hours to comply with our list of demands. Otherwise, we're going to financially ruin you. So I basically went back to them and said, well, Dentons, you've got 24 hours to comply, to answer my questions. Otherwise, I'm going to publish your letter. So now, funny enough, when we get into the 1st of May, Kitco's lawyers, Dentons, they didn't meet the 24-hour time frame. So I published their letter. And so a number of your viewers probably would have seen the tweet at the time where I published the full letter, and people were able to know that the cease and desist notice had come from Kitco. But then shortly after, I get a letter from Denton saying that this particular tweet, where I don't even mention Kitco, when I talk about the silver cabal, this includes false, misleading, and baseless statements, and this also has caused damage to this has also caused damage to Kitco, which again, particularly about this particular tweet that doesn't mention Kitco at all. I mean, I thought this was very sloppy lawyering by Dentons, who basically made a statement that an experienced lawyer would know that they could no way prove that this reference to the Silver Cabal is going to cause Kitco any form of financial damage. Now, the really critical thing so when I started to get a legal team together, and I established a GoFundMe account. We established a legal defense fund. We raised some money that helped with legal costs. One of the critical things was I started to go back through this particular time period of around the first week of April. And I thought to myself, well, they said my statements caused damage, but was anyone else making statements about Kitco during this period of time? Now, I'm going to mention two names who are public figures. The first one is Craig Hemke from TF Metals Report, and the second one is Big Swee from Road to Rooter. Now, and obviously I don't want to necessarily, put them in any sort of legal position, but they did make public statements about Kitco before I made these specific tweets that Kitco's lawyer said caused them damage. Now, if we can go on to slide 7, Tom. So here is a tweet from Craig Hemke, where he says, the silver squeeze focus needs to not just be in Australia. Yes, the fractional reserve unallocated accounts in Perth and Sydney are ripe for a bank run, but unallocated accounts are a global issue. Here's one from Canada, Canada's largest dealer. And who's Craig referencing? Kitco. So now this tweet by Craig was actually published on the 1st of April. So, and you can see the 1st of April if you look at the bottom of the screen. So basically you have, before I say anything about Kitco, which caused them so-called irreparable damage, Craig Hemke is calling Kitco out for fractional reserve unallocated accounts well before I have. And so that's a really important point, because, if it ever went to trial, one of our key questions to Kitco is, well, how do you know that I caused you, if there was damage, how do you know it was me? How do you know it wasn't Craig or someone else? And if we can go on to slide 8, Tom. Now, Bix didn't make a statement specifically on Twitter, but he actually released a video on YouTube, and he made a specific reference to Kitco, and that he had been contacted by that he had been contacted by a Kitco customer who sought a redemption, and that redemption couldn't be met. So he made a reference to it in a video. So I actually took the video and then I tweeted about what in terms of Bix says. So again, John,
do you remember if that delivery couldn't be fulfilled in a reasonable amount of time or at all?
So I mean, to be honest, I'd probably have to go back and watch. Okay. In terms of what Bix said, because I mean, a Kitco customer, from what I understand, approached Bix with his own experience of what they went through. So I think at the time it was, like I've just been flat out refused in terms of redemption, but people can go back and check in terms of what information that Bix has, and I'm sure, maybe the next week or so, Bix is going to release his own video and perhaps clarify what he was told by that particular customer. But Bix released a video around the 4th of April, and again, this is the time period before I made my comments about Kitco. So basically, we have a couple of commentators making some controversial comments about Kitco, and Kitco just focus on me. Now, I spoke to Craig Hemke 24 hours ago. He never got a legal notice. I have had some communication with Bix. I haven't spoken to him probably in the last couple of months. But to the best of my knowledge, Bix, we never got a legal notice from Kitco either. So you've got people who have got bigger social media profiles and people who have been in the game longer than I have, making comments about Kitco in North America, they are untouched. But it just so happens that little old John Adams from regional Australia somehow gets targeted by Kitco. That is a very interesting development as to why they would come after me. Why they wouldn't sort of target them. Now, what happened after this sort of period around the 1st of April, in terms of the 1st of May, when I published the Kitco correspondence in terms of what their lawyers had sent to me, that's when it started to get really interesting, because I sent their lawyers in Sydney a range of follow-up questions so that we could actually get to the truth of what this is. And for about a month, I had heard nothing from Kitco's lawyers. They went completely dark. And I'm scratching my head thinking, so here I am trying to inform the silver market in the midst of the silver squeeze, and I get this letter saying you've got 24 hours, otherwise we're going to bankrupt you. And then all of a sudden they go quiet. And I was just sort of scratching my head thinking, I don't understand what the hell is really going on here. So now around the 29th of May, I basically sent an email to, I sent a letter to Dentons, and I said, I'm giving you one final chance to respond to my correspondence. Otherwise, I can only assume you no longer represent Kitco. And they never refused to respond. So then what I did was, so now generally when you get a legal threat and there's no follow-up, you assume that the whole thing is a hoax or a bluff and that there is nothing to it. But I thought to myself, well, I just don't want to let this lie, because I want to know what Kitco's legal position is. So what I did was I actually engaged with a particular solicitor here in Sydney, and we drafted a letter. And because we assumed that Dentons was no longer representing Kitco, we sent the letter directly to Kitco's president, Bart Kittner. And we just basically sort of said, hey, you came after John Adams with these extraordinary allegations of irreparable damage, that he was malicious, that he made false and misleading statements about your company. And now all of a sudden we hear nothing from you. What's going on? So I was going to say, if you go to slide 9, here. So one of the things that we were really saying to Kitco, put up or shut up. If you're going to sue, we'll sue. Otherwise, we're going to make a number of conclusions if you don't sue. And so this sentence comes from the letter that my solicitor sent to Kitco. And here's the quote: "The only conclusion that we draw from your failure to respond is that your demands and accompanying threats are vexatious, intended to intimidate, and seek to limit our clients' ability to speak openly and freely on sensitive or controversial matters related to the precious metals market." So basically what we're saying is, we think you're all bluff. We think that you're trying to intimidate him. You don't want him to speak openly in terms of these issues, and that's why you sent the cease and desist notice. Because if you really had suffered damage, if you really were going to sue, well, you would have filed in the New South Wales Supreme Court, and we would have started to see some action. And so we basically said to him, if you don't respond to us, even in terms of this new letter, this is our conclusion. Now, if you go into slide 10, Tom, one of the things that we specifically wanted from Bart Kittner directly is, we said, importantly, our client notes that other prominent precious metal commentators based in North America have made critical statements and allegations about your company on multiple platforms and internet websites in the period of late March and early 2021. So, and I've just given you two examples, Bixby and Craig Kempke. I know that there's another commentator in terms of Harvey Organ. On his website, he's made assertions about Kitco around this period of time, and Harvey Organ never heard from Kitco. So what we're basically saying is, and so if we go to the second quote we're saying, given this fact, our client would welcome evidence which conclusively proves that the purported damage which your company has allegedly suffered was directly caused by our clients and not from statements made by other precious metal commentators. So what we're basically saying is, if there is damage, prove us the damage and prove that it was only John Adams that caused you the damage, and it wasn't the Harvey Organs, it wasn't the Craig Hemkes, it wasn't the Big Swears. And to be honest, that's a very hard case for Kitco to prove. But we basically put it to them and said, okay, so if you're going to go down this path and try to shut John Adams up, come to the table with the evidence. Otherwise, go away. Mm-hmm. Now we sent this at the end of June of 2021, and we gave Kitco 7 days to respond. And here's where we get into, a really extraordinary set of events that I did not see coming in terms of how Kitco wanted to respond to this. So before we go into Bart Kittner's response, Tom, was there any sort of follow-up or any questions you had for me before we move on?
No, I think I'm just trying to like you're saying, just trying to follow the story here and understand how this all fits together.
Okay, so if you want to go to slide 11, we're going to quote directly from what Bart Kittner, the president of Kitco, wrote to my lawyer in response to our letter. And here is the quote: "Your client may or may not be aware of our lawyers at Dentons was a recipient of a threat of rape and was subject to racist and misogynistic slurs by one of your client's supporters. It is quite clear from the threat that the individual responsible was acting in response to the incendiary rhetoric and vilification of Kitco and Dentons in your client's social media postings. Given the seriousness of the threat, our lawyers were required to report the matter to New South Wales Police, who have regrettably needed to become involved in the matter." Now, when I got this, when my lawyer got this email and my lawyer sent it to me, we were just in shock. So this was all about John Adams talking about silver and unallocated, pull allocated accounts, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're saying that my commentary about silver has led to someone who I don't know who threatening rape against a lawyer in Sydney. So to be honest, Tom, I mean, when you talk about silver and matters of business and commerce, when you're getting into in terms of civil law, once you get into the issues of rape, that's when you get into criminal law and it becomes much more serious. Now, a couple of statements I will say is that I never directed anyone to contact Dentons. Now, I published the letter on Twitter because I said I would, and I did, but I never told anyone to contact Dentons. And I have never, ever in my life, ever told anyone to engage in criminal misconduct, whether sexual or non-sexual. Mm-hmm. So I have never directed anyone to say so. But Kitco, in this correspondence, has said that just by talking about silver, John Adams can inspire threats of rape and racism and misogyny. That is just the most preposterous and outrageous allegation that I have ever heard. Now, and obviously again, they said they went to the police. So obviously, and when we obviously read that, we thought, well, what I should say, Tom, is when we got this response, at that point in time, I had not heard from the police at all. Mm-hmm. So we were just, again, very surprised by this whole set of events, and we wanted to now get to the bottom of not this. So obviously, our initial set of inquiries was about the damage that Kitco had purportedly experienced based on my tweets. But then we had to actually now address this issue of someone being threatened with rape. And I'm somehow involved in that. So
John, again, the point of this, I guess, just to make it clear, was that this wasn't a threat against one of Kitco's employees. It was against the law firm that they had retained in Australia.
Correct.
which doesn't, I mean, just trying to think through that, I could see if somebody had invested a ton of money and asked for actual physical delivery of the silver that they thought they were, owed, or that they thought they had claim to, I could maybe understand somebody becoming aggressive in that case. But I don't understand why anybody would, threaten the law firm or one of the lawyers at Dentons because of that. That part just doesn't make sense to me. And I wanted to ask if at any point you were able to substantiate that claim.
No. So I'm glad you asked that question, Tom. So one of the things that my lawyer went to, so once we got the response from Kitco, we realized that Dentons was still representing Kitco, even though they went quiet. And obviously, what we had concluded is the reason why they went quiet was because they went to the police. Mm-hmm. So now we asked them for a copy of the threat. So obviously we wanted to see what was said in this threatening email to Dentons. We wanted to know who the person was, whether I knew the person, whether I don't know the person. I mean, look. So obviously I have a lot of contacts, in Australia and around the world, but also I have a lot of followers on social media who I've never met before. So I have no idea who this was, if this was a real threat, because at the back of my mind I thought to myself, well, they're saying this happened, but unless they show me the documentary evidence, I mean, I can't be sure that it really did happen. Mm-hmm. But in any case, so Dentons responded to my lawyer, and they actually gave us the details of the police officer who took the complaint. So I said, great, okay, so we got the details of the police officer. So I actually emailed the police officer, and I CC'd my solicitor, and I've given you a copy of that email, Tom. And I basically said, I understand there may or may not be an investigation. My commentary about the silver market may have be subject to police inquiries. I'm happy to voluntarily meet with New South Wales Police and provide a full statement, and I'll obviously bring my lawyer along. Mm-hmm. If there's any investigation, happy to provide full assistance with the police. So we wanted to make it very clear to the police that if there was any criminal investigation, we've got nothing to hide because we did nothing wrong. So we obviously went straight to the cops and said, hey, if you want to call us in for questioning, you tell us when and where, and we'll come straight away, and we'll assist police with whatever investigation or inquiries that is happening. And so, in early, it was about mid-July of 2021. That's when we contacted the police, and I can say hand on heart that I have not to date ever received a response from the police. Mm-hmm. So again, was there a threat? So I'm assuming because I went to the police, there was some sort of threat, but who wrote it? What was actually said? How is John Adams directly involved in that threat? I still don't know. Mm-hmm. But the really fascinating thing with this is that when you press people in the silver world, you get these types of really interesting responses, and that is something that I really found quite shocking. So when we start to think about, well, what are the implications of this is that, obviously in the mind of Kitco, they think I've got a lot of power. They think that some economist from Australia can issue a few tweets and cause irreparable damage and can inspire people to engage in sexual misconduct. And not only just sexual misconduct, but sexual criminal misconduct. And
I also find it interesting the verbiage of racist and misogynistic slurs. And, that kind of comes back to something we heard only a couple months ago from Canada's Prime Minister being, accusatory, being lobbed at the truckers and the protest against them. I just, you and I spoke before the call about this, and I just find it so uncanny that these terms are being lobbed at people and without any substantiation of it, right?
Well, yes. So all I can say is that if Dentons did receive an email with misogynistic and racist comments, I have not seen it. My lawyers have not seen it. So could it exist? Sure, but I haven't been able to substantiate it. But in the 21st century, where you got Marxism and workism all over the place, you tend to see these terms being floated around, whether it's Kitco or Justin Trudeau or even people in the United States or Australia. So yeah, but the really interesting thing with this is that now. According to Kitco, with all this supposed power that I have, I must be the greatest silver commentator ever to have lived, because I don't want to sort of criticize my colleagues, but whether it's David Morgan or Craig Kempke or Big Sweet, Chris Marcus or Rob Keynes or some of these other guys, they don't have this type of power according to Kitco. So for some reason, Kitco hasn't, and to be honest, a range of commentators has made a range of statements about a range of companies in this unallocated, pool allocated space. Mm-hmm. But there's only been one person who they tried to silence, and that's me. And now, why me? That's a really interesting question. And I've been spending sort of the last 9 months trying to figure out why. And I think I've stumbled across something, but I can't say too much for now. But hopefully at some point soon, we'll have more to say on this. But this is what we've just gone through, Tom, is the essence of the silver sex scandal. That an economist from Australia talking about silver can cause. Think about it. Vladimir Putin needs a whole military to cause irreparable damage in the Ukraine. And all I have to do is sit on my couch and issue a few tweets, and I can destroy the largest dealership in Montreal. And I can inspire people, investors around the world to engage in sexual criminal misconduct. And I never knew I had these superhuman powers, but according to Kitco, I do. And I should say, for the record, that this is 12 months, we're about 12 months on from when this whole saga went down. Kitco has never started litigation against me. Mm-hmm. There's never been any court proceedings. There's never been any injunctions. I've never complied with any of their in terms of their requirements of me. I never deleted the tweets. I never issued a retraction. And this entire threat and going to the police and everything else, it was all a bluff. Why did they bluff against me? And why do they think that I'm such a threat to Kitco's operations in Montreal? Who knows? Maybe David Lynn at Kitco News should have me on. We can have a fruitful discussion. But I'm sure that the powers that be at Kitco won't allow me to go on Kitco News. But that is the essence of the question. And in the context of what you and I and other commentators have been talking about over the last 2 years in particular about transparency and integrity in the precious metals markets. These tactics speak a lot about what the powers that be are doing, and if you press them hard enough, how they'll respond.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that Kitco would be interested in that story, considering it doesn't really cover crypto, right?
Well, who knows? My bailiwick is more in the gold and silver space. Perhaps someone else should press Kitco on crypto, and who knows what will happen to them.
Mm-hmm. So, John, after this last correspondence from the president of Kitco, did you get any other response after that? No. Thing is that after we got this response, after we emailed the police never came back to us. We never initiated any further correspondence with Dentons or Kitco, and we never received any correspondence back from any further correspondence from Kitco or Dentons. So basically, the situation has just sat. And
So one of the, now, I mean, again, Kitco said they reserve their rights. Mm-hmm. In theory, if they could come back and start to sue me, but we have asked them about 4 or 5 times. You said you suffered damage. Show us the damage. Give us your financials, and show us how much profit and how much revenue you lost, specifically in this period of early April, and show it was directly John Adams that caused that loss, and it wasn't Craig Hemke, and it wasn't Big Sweet, and it wasn't Harvey Organ or Wall Street Silver. And because think about it, on Wall Street Silver, there was all sorts of comments about Kitco as well. So they would have to prove it was just me, and they can't. So that's why there's no litigation, because it's very impossible. I mean, just say they, for example, lost $1 million in sales. How can they say it was me specifically? I mean, they would have to go and maybe do a survey of potential customers or existing customers, and that survey says John Adams led me not to buy from you. I mean that's how they would have to prove it in court, but they can't do that. So that's why there's been no action. But why come after me, and why has every other commentator in the world been untouched by Kitco? That is a big mystery, and I think we've found the answer. And hopefully in the next 6 months we can come back and reveal more about what we think is going on.
Mm-hmm. Well, and John, this is, I guess this whole thing just stemmed from trying to educate and inform people of, some of these products that might not be what they say they are. And again, this doesn't necessarily only apply to Kitco or ABC, the Perth Mint, whoever, we've mentioned in this particular interview. Some of these pooled unallocated programs, all we've tried to do is show people that they might not be what they think they are. And when push comes to shove, you might not be able to get your medal, right?
Yes. I mean, that is 100%. But the other point I think we should make is that, just say, for example, Tom, that a unallocated or pool allocated product is fully backed. Mm-hmm. One of the key points I wanted to make 12 months ago when you and I started to talk about this topic is that you technically don't own the silver, or if it's another precious metal like gold, you don't actually own the gold. Unallocated pool allocated products. But I mean, basically, you own a share of a general pool of silver, but you don't have legal title. You've got to buy to have ownership. And again, I've got a good sense about Australian law, but common law countries like Canada and the United States and the United Kingdom is very similar. To have ownership and legal title, you have to be able to own a specific bar that you can claim is your property. Mm-hmm. And with unallocated and pool allocated, you don't own a specific bar, and therefore, even if you've put, for example, $100,000 down in an unallocated or pool allocated product, you don't own the silver. You basically are a counterparty. You have counterparty risk with the custodian, and that legal relationship, carries risks that most investors are not fully aware of. And so when people put money in pool allocated or unallocated products, they don't fully understand the legal implications of them doing so, because a lot of precious metals investors, they want to own precious metals. They want exposure. The most safest form of exposure is ownership. Mm-hmm. And unallocated and pool allocated doesn't give you ownership. And that was the main message of what I wanted to bring forward last year. But obviously then when we started to see, in the context of the Perth Mint, when the Perth Mint couldn't meet redemptions within their contractual time frame, in some schemes, not all the silver and not all the gold is there. And Craig Hemke has written extensively about this for a number of years. And that was the second risk that we wanted to say. First one is, if you want ownership, got to go buy the specific bar or coin. But then if you have unallocated, pool allocated product, some of the programs of the world are fully backed. A lot of them are not fully backed. And that second risk is something that investors need to be clear on. And that was the whole purpose of the exercise. It wasn't to cause irreparable damage. It wasn't to inspire sexual criminal misconduct. But when you press certain dealerships on these certain types of questions, you get very interesting responses.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, I think that's a pretty decent place to wrap up for today. Of course, for anybody that wants to see more of your tweets and maybe go back to some of the stuff that we were talking about, you're on Twitter at Adams Economics, and I believe on Reddit the same handle, right?
Correct. Yep.
Excellent, John. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we do wrap up?
No, I think it's all I'll say is that I think we have more news coming in the next few months. So for all of those silver investors out there who are interested in understanding, how the real world of silver works, hold on to your hat, and there will be more to say in the near future.
Sounds great, John. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
This podcast is for general informational purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be taken as investment advice. Guests on this show are not compensated for their appearance. Listeners are urged to educate themselves and make their own decisions. Do not base any investment decisions on the information contained.